Hi, my name is Koku with blackfilm.com, and I'm here with my friend, Brandon Cordy. He's someone I'm very I'm happy to talk to today because he's just one of these brilliant minds, and I love the way you think and the way you break things down.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, it's really exciting. Brandon is he's such an amazing creator. He's super avid film enthusiast, motion graphics designer, the owner of Luleko Media, and he's launching a podcast, and we're going to talk about that. Thank you so much for joining me, Brandon.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. There's questions I can ask you that I would not even be able to ask anybody else that you could break down much better than most. So I'm really here for this.
Mm.
But before we start, I know that you're based in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where you're from?
No, I'm actually from Augusta, which is
Okay.
a couple of 100 miles east of Atlanta.
Then you settled in Atlanta, and how's Atlanta treating you?
It's fine, except for between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. and 6 p.m.
Oh, what's happening there? Is it the trains?
Traffic.
Oh yeah. Oh right.
Yeah.
That's one thing about Atlanta I don't miss, and it's so funny because you don't even realize, like, LA traffic is absolute hell, but Atlanta traffic, like, you don't even know traffic till you've been in Atlanta. It is, yeah.
Like LA traffic, I've been to LA a couple of times. LA traffic is steadier. Like, it's bad, but like it's steadier. Atlanta traffic it's like Jaws. It sneaks up on you.
I think with LA, like, what's weird is, like, you'll be on the 101 and it's 11 o'clock at night and there's traffic. Well, where is everybody going, and why am I going there too? Like, what are you doing? So it's always that's the strange thing about LA that you don't get from Atlanta. But let's talk more about you. So I want to know more about Luleko Media. What is Luleko Media?
Luleko Media, basically, I've been doing freelance motion design, graphic design, video editing, and audio production and things for a long time. I'm just trying to formalizing it now, taking on more freelance work, basically in those areas. Helping people with promoting businesses, putting together promotional videos, helping people have independent films, get those edited, color corrected, audio mixed, all that kind of good stuff, so they can get their stuff out there, and just try to use my abilities and talents for good.
And I mean, obviously we don't want anybody to take advantage of you, but is this something where it's like, would you work with a small business as opposed to like okay, so that's great.
Absolutely.
So you're willing.
Businesses of all sizes, like working with a lot of independent filmmakers, that kind of stuff. I try to do things that I feel like would be rewarding in some way for everybody. That's very important to me, just to make sure that I'm dedicating my time, because it's right now it is still a side hustle. I have a full time as well, but dedicate my time to something that I can be proud of being part of, basically.
So because you work behind the scenes and you're able to put things together and just have a different type of lens through what we're looking at, and you brought up color correction, and that's a really interesting thing when I talk to people that work behind the scenes, especially in editing and graphics design and so forth. So when you look at colors and how that impacts what we look at, I was actually just speaking yesterday with the director of End of the Road, and she was telling me that we were talking about how colors can inform how you emotionally can even feel in a scene. And as the viewer, you don't even realize that's what's happening, but you all are able to really just add a layer of complexity that we are not even dialed into. Can you explain that process?
Yeah, especially nowadays with digital cameras, a lot of the color design for a movie is left to do in post. Now, a lot of it is still done, of course, on the set by production design and everything, but there are like we talk about Instagram filters and things, but there are things you can do with like tints and color palettes, things, and you can isolate a certain color on somebody, either like their skin or the shirt they're wearing or whatever, and you can change those things or just have an overall look. You can make day for night, or you can make something look colder or warmer, basically by adding blue or taking blue away and adding oranges and yellows. But basically, like, our response to the color are essentially sort of kind of innate. It's something that we're partially born with. It's something that we drew through culture and osmosis almost. We absorb how those affect us. you know, blues, you know, and cooler colors, you know, tend to make us calm down and press and make things rotate backwards. Warmer
Mm-hmm.
colors come forwards, your oranges and your reds, basically, you know, and so those colors are always still used to represent certain things. You know, greens used to represent the earth, you know, and when you have movies, you know, there's a lot of, you know, color design, you know, just like what they call mise en scene, I believe is pronounced. Hope I pronounced that properly.
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Where you know how things are arranged in the scenes and forming the scenes, much as the dialogue and the acting is. You know, like a lot of especially like a lot of filmmakers are very deliberate with how they set things up. Spike Lee, for example, Alfred Hitchcock. You know, where every candle and every single last piece of paper is arranged a certain way to evoke a certain feeling or theme.
Hmm.
Like everything from that all the way up to what the actors are doing is super important, and color plays a lot into that. Even in a black and white movie, color
Hmm.
values will still play into effect. Like whether something is light gray or dark gray, how things are lit. So a lot of people, it's so funny talking to people about black and white movies and things like,
Hmm.
but there's so much still of production design that goes into those as well, and of paying attention to how, just since you're only using values rather
Hmm.
than anything else, how that works.
Hmm. And I've talked to you about this before because I usually, and I mean this in a very complimentary way. A lot of times, if I ask you a question, I'm just there to listen and to
Mhm.
absorb because I'm just trying to be informed about certain things. And one of the things that we've talked about is like whether a movie can stand the test of time, and we talk about those kinds of
Mhm.
movies that really do in a right now today in a 2022 lens, like can you still watch that movie? And one of the ones that we've talked about just from a writing perspective, and it's considered one of the greatest films. Obviously, you know what I'm about to say. It's a movie like Citizen Kane, right?
Mhm.
So we've talked about that, and I mean, it's just like when I watch Citizen Kane today, it absolutely applies to so many things, and it just informs so much about what we see and people being grandiose and those sad, dark origin stories. And I was like, wow, this piece, like, you realize a lot of stories are kind of retold, even if they're brilliantly redone, but some things aren't necessarily original in terms of like plot idea.
Right. Well,
Hmm.
Citizen King famously is a romaniclev of the life of William Randolph Hearst, the
Hmm.
newspaper tycoon. So a lot of that, his his rise to power is, he couldn't quite follow from grace when they made the movie, which is why that movie was, when it came out, very controversial.
Hmm.
They tried to get it, run out of movie theaters. They booed it at the Oscars, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But just like the whole idea of power corrupting people who have good intentions, that story is told time and time again because it's very true. And when you watch Citizen Kane now, especially after the last couple of years,
Yeah.
it's like a horror movie. It's kind of like a weird prescient thing that predicted
Hmm.
the last couple of years of politics and probably the next couple as well.
Hmm.
And like just because it was made in 1941 doesn't mean that the themes don't still relate. Like
Right.
man, like every time I watch it now, I'm just like, when I first saw the movie, it blew me away. What blew me away was this the styling of it, how the sets were designed, and like later on I learned about so many optical tricks Orson Welles was doing. Like for its time, it's a very much like almost a special effects movie. There's so many
Hmm.
effects and things that are invisible to the eye, but are being done either in camera or in post. But the more I watch it now, the more I'm getting into the themes of it and into like what it's saying and like what the script is trying to do, and it's kind of scary.
It is. It is. But you know what? When I watched this movie, I'm about to say, I felt like, wow, this is kind of. It reminded me of Citizen Kane in a way. It was just more obviously to the times, but I felt like Cruella was like that.
Hmm.
Did you see Cruella?
I haven't seen Cruella yet. No.
I think it's interesting because it is more, it's like modern times, and it's kind of really flashy and everything, but it does a lot of great, it's great for the story, and it talks about her origin stories as well. And
Hmm.
it's very interesting because there are these characters where you kind of really do feel sorry for them, but then the life just takes a turn where something like a switch goes off,
Hmm.
whether of course it wasn't necessarily their doing, but it's interesting to see how how these villains are made in that sense. Hmm.
Right.
Were you ever a person that watched Star Wars?
It's so funny. I had not seen Star Wars until came to Atlanta and started working here. My manager at the time found out I hadn't saw Star Wars and put it on my to-do list at work. Um, I had seen episode 2 in passing because friends went to go see, but I don't know. I missed Star Wars. I didn't really grow up in like a sci-fi household. Basically,
Yeah.
the if anything, I saw Star Trek: The Next Generation, on TV. I didn't see.
Yeah, my sister is huge on Star Trek. Like my sister like dresses like a Trekkie. Like she literally has every like yeah, she's
Yeah.
outside doing like weird hand gestures with people that get it. I'm like, I didn't see that. She's like, oh, they had the book bag. I knew the hat. I'm like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. But it's really cool. But I'm like, wow, sometimes you're just like so outside of something. You don't even realize that the people that have that commonality, like they just totally get it. Like, hey girl, so
Yeah.
yeah. I totally get that. So in terms of filmmaking, so are you also in terms of in the creative space, I should say, do you get into the writing as well and directing?
I've done some writing.
Hmm.
I haven't got anything in my stuff like produced yet. Hopefully one day soon.
Hmm.
Directing, I mean, nothing narrative, a whole lot of like documentary style things, films for industry, that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
I've been waffling on trying to get, a nice, good, DSLR camera
Hmm.
and, get into that. I should stop waffling and go ahead and do that.
And you should do it, right?
Yeah, but I'll get by the end of the year I'll have that all figured out. I'm just
But what do you say to people when people are like, oh, why get the DSLR? Why get the red camera? Why spend this money? People are making films in 4K on their iPhones. So like where is the balance?
you can actually later iPhones, like especially the newer ones, you probably could do just fine with just the phone.
Hmm.
Really what you're getting is like when you have a more professional camera, like the size of the sensor inside of it is larger, so it's able to capture more detail in the images that it gets. That's really the main difference. Like, I mean, there's a lot more differences, but that's the biggest one, is that you're getting a better quality of picture.
Hmm.
But to be fair though, like the phones we have now are pretty good with visuals. If you can get like, one of those iPhone accessories for like a tripod, or like,
Mm.
like a selfie stick or whatever, just,
Hmm.
just don't try to, hold it on like, like by yourself, like unless you want to sit there and try to destabilize it in post. But
Hmm.
you could, people have made movies on iPhones, like you can do it. It's not impossible. It's just the same thing with somebody. If you are trying to, I guess move, whether or not you're getting like, like somebody's 30-year-old moving van, or like a new one with extra space, it's
Hmm.
basically sort of kind of that's,
That
that's
okay? That no, that's a great comparison. I didn't think about that. It's like, yeah, it's like an upgrade. Like, oh,
right.
okay. And
Yes,
now
yes,
this one got a bathroom.
yes.
um, so you just mentioned something when you were saying directing. You were like, well, in regards to you've directed like you've worked with documentaries in a sense. It
Hmm.
would seem to me, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but it would seem to me that someone that has that editing background and
Hmm.
the background that you do, it would better benefit a documentary for someone with your skill set to be able to direct the documentary, because it's a lot of like archival footage, and it's not like you're directing people as much as you're directing the shots and the flow of the storyline. Would that be accurate or
That's accurate. That's
okay?
accurate.
Yeah, I would think so, right? Hmm.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
definitely something like, I would want to do as well, like to do like documentaries on my own, like about maybe about, like movie history, about, and things like that,
Hmm.
or just in general, just about certain subjects and things, that like music history as well. It's always, like a topic I'm very interested in. Just
Hmm. I know you talk some of it. I love it. So, okay, I'm going to ask you this question. I want to talk about this, and you probably would never remember this conversation, but you brought this up so many times too. And I've never understood
Mhm.
ever why you love Family Matters. I never got it.
It's comfort food. It's the same thing people who go to McDonald's, like Family Matters, it's not you know, prestige TV at any by any means, but it's a thing from my childhood that I enjoy.
Mhm.
I'm not going to defend it as, I think the acting was always, more or less fine. Like a lot of those actors on that show, Joe Marie Payton and Reginald Vell Johnson. These are people who are like multi-talented, have been in so many
Absolutely.
things
Hmm.
before and after. But it's just a thing. Like, I mean, people. I sort of quietly feel the same way about Martin. Like,
Hmm.
I love Martin. I have all the Martin box sets and everything,
Hmm.
but I don't talk about Martin that much because like people was just like family matters. They'll roll their eyes. Martin, they'll get into an argument with you
Oh, that's true. It's
because
almost like
Martin,
trying to like casually play spades with people you don't know. It's like, I'm
yes,
not doing this. Yeah. No, it's so true.
because there are so many people who love Martin, so many people who do not love Martin.
Yeah, yeah. It's very either or. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and I
I
didn't
think
know
what I love.
that.
Mhm.
So,
No, I was just gonna say what I loved about Martin was its imperfection. I mean, there's a lot of times people just kind of get out the scene and they're laughing in the scene. Like there's so many like
mhm.
bloopers and so much crazy. You can just tell they were actually having fun on the set, and
The
and
episode,
that makes it a good time. And even like the really bad effects, it's
yeah,
just added something to it. Yeah, I always enjoyed that.
the
But
episode
Family
where he's trying to find his CD player and he's got the dog,
Matters. Oh
and
yeah,
he's
he's
and the other actors, Tisha Campbell and Tommy Ford, and them, they are trying so hard
so
not
hard.
to break out laughing because they are clearly just they are in it. They're like holding that laugh back so much. And it was Tommy Davidson that made Martin break on camera, and they kept it right when he was playing
What?
Darnell. Like, did you miss me? There was something he said about fish, or about catching fish or whatever it was, and Martin literally breaks right there.
I'm gonna go back to that. No, Tommy Davidson is
Yes.
hilarious. He's definitely a legend. Yeah, for sure. But I guess with me, I think I had, if we go back to Family Matters, I think I have the same general issue with it that most people did. Like I didn't understand like the evolution of Urkel to Stefan Urkel. I just didn't understand a lot of like
Oh,
everything centered around the same thing. But the Stefan Urkel to me, that's when it so-called jumped the shark for sure.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Family Matters became basically a cartoon around about season
Yeah.
4 when like Urkel like completely took over the show.
Yes.
And like from there forward it starts to go even further off key, like the idea of he can step into a machine and turn into a different person, then different people plural, Bruce Lee and Elvis and stuff. I mean, it's by that point it's not even science fiction, it's a cartoon basically. But like I just think that they got so it's kind of like what happened with Fonz on Happy Days. So for Fonz on
Yeah.
Happy Days, the only thing that he could do that was like sort of kind of like cartoonish was he could make a jukebox turn or anything else,
Right.
like but like with Steve Urkel, like because that show. Have you ever seen the first 11 episodes of Family Matters, the pre-Urkel episodes?
I don't think I have, and I would be willing to. I'll do that.
It's a very different show.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I'd
It's
like to do that.
lower key and calmer, but I don't think it was not doing very well in the ratings, and the executives didn't like it very much. And then when they had Urkel, he was like in his original one shot guest spot come on to be Laura's date. This is what we need. The studio audience reacted to it, and the show became, Jaleel White became basically the breakout star of the show. I'm sure you've read some of the articles from the last year or so about how the rest of the actors in the show maybe didn't like that very much.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Uh,
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
if you like
I think
dig
Jo Marie
more
Patton, like she expressed her displeasure like during the era of the show,
during
right?
the show,
Hmm.
I didn't know if I should have brought it up, but yeah, she was not happy when she was on the show. That's why she
Right.
leaves in the last season.
Hmm.
Like I think people talk about the Aunt Viv, Janet Hubert, Daphne Maxwell Reed thing, but that was she was fired from that show.
Yes.
Jo Marie Payton quit, and they begged her
Yeah.
not to, but she left because she was just tired
She's
of
like she
doing
couldn't
the
do it.
show.
Yeah.
So like they went and got Judy Ann Elder for what they thought was going to be the last season and a half, just trying to be the last 10 episodes because they got canceled early
Hmm.
on
So
PBS.
this is actually an interesting transition because I was thinking about people like actors that were frustrated with the scripts and what was intended to be what the show was. And I was going to ask you about Norman Lear. But before we
Hmm.
even get into Norman Lear as, a person, an entity, let's talk about Good Times,
Yes.
because that's exactly what happened with John Amos. He didn't like
Hmm.
the show. He didn't like the direction of the show.
I
And
have
he
a question.
hated. Mhm, mhm.
When you were a little kid and you were watching Good Times, and you saw the episodes. You were obviously watching reruns, but you saw the episode where James died. Did you think that John Amos had died in real life, or was it just me?
I think I did. I think we all did. I think we thought he
Yeah,
was dead, and it was sad.
because
Yes,
like I saw Good Times before I ever saw Roots.
I think I did too. Because
Yeah.
I remember being a kid. Remember how they used to wheel out the thing,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
TV, yeah. And I remember being a kid, and we watched Roots in class.
Yeah.
So
Because
I know I saw Good Times first.
I saw
Yeah,
Good Times, then Roots, and then Coming to America, and I was confused. I was like,
like why
but I later on found out, and like one good resource, the archive of television interviews that are
he?
like
Hmm.
they the Academy of Television Archives, basically they have all these 3 and 4 hour interviews with people who worked in TV, and
Hmm.
John Amos has one, and he talks about the whole thing basically about how he didn't like what they were doing with the JJ character. He didn't like how, because the show, it's a typical normal Lear show at first. It was about issues, about
Hmm.
the black community. Michael was kind of supposed to be the breakout character. They had this whole thing where they basically were pulled Ralph Carter out of the Raising of the Sun musical. And because they wanted him because he was going to be the man, like, all the issues came through him. You watch the first couple of episodes,
Yeah.
Jesus and George Washington owned slaves and everything. But, you know, the writers just, took a shine to Jimmy Walker, doing the JJ thing. And, it's that thing where they took over. And that was another show where Esther Roll and Jalen Amos were in like the press, like, we don't
Because
like this.
yeah, these are like classically trained actors who
Yes.
you wouldn't even expect them to even necessarily have taken those roles per se, at
Right.
least if they were going to be reduced to that. So it was very sad. So I think when at a point in my life I would read that, so I'd be like, oh my God, but that's a classic show. What are they talking about? But then when you start to
Right.
really look at it, you're like, no, I get it. Yeah, because that's not what they signed up for.
Right. And you think about the professionalism you have to be able to still go to work and still play a family on
Yes.
television every week. Because
Hmm.
it's like, you are still under contract. You still got to show up, and it doesn't behoove you to do a bad job.
Hmm.
But,
Hmm.
it's like, I tell people sometimes that, when you work in TV or in film, that is a lot of it is like any other job where your coworkers, you have to, get along with them a certain way. You may or may not be friends, but you have to be professional.
Right. Hmm. Yeah, that's true, and I've always said that. Like, any job I've ever worked, I mean, it's not possible for someone to get a read on how I feel about them. I may not even like the person. I mean, yeah, I really may not like them, but they would never know that because I just treat everybody the same.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you just and I can't imagine if that was the dynamic and you dislike the person and now you've got romantic scenes. It's like, oh my gosh, like
Mhm.
bad day at work, honey. So yeah. So I want to ask your opinion on Norman Lear because Norman Lear, I think with time, there have been like some really there's been a lot of criticism of him. But I
Mhm.
mean, if you ask like even my mother is such a super fan of him.
He's a lot of people like it's like a balancing act basically. There's a
Hmm.
lot of like he did a lot of good for television, as far as like expanding what TV shows could be about and everything. He did like a lot of bad, like, as far as like Eric Monte has been clear about how he doesn't like Norman Lear, about how he handled first his writing on All in the Family, and
Hmm.
credit that he may or may not have received for that.
Hmm.
And then Good Times, where he's credited as the creator but didn't have much say. They kind of took it away from him and everything. Like, there's a lot of that and a lot of Norman Lear. Some of the things he's done, he's apologized for. Like him and John Amos made up after he fired John Amos off of Good Times because
Mm.
they had a whole lot of really heated arguments, and then he caused them over the summer breaks, like you're fired basically. And but they made up 15 or so 20 years later, and
Hmm.
when John Amos did the show, I forgot what it's called, I think 702 Hauser, where he lives in Archie Bunker's house. It's like a one
Mm.
show. And of course, later on he does the Norman Lear special. um, but I think with a lot of people in general, when you get to be that successful, you're going to make mistakes.
Hmm.
You just hope they aren't big mistakes, and you hope that you learn from them and that you have the humility to apologize for them. I feel like Norman Lear's been halfway there. I feel like
Hmm.
there are definitely some things that he's just chosen not to address that he really ought to, maybe perhaps.
Hmm.
I know he just turned 100, but as far as I know, he's still,
I think he probably is still very lucid.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Under the assumption, yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Like, 'cause he still got specials going. He's gonna be on
Hmm.
television later this year, so he can still work. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he has he written a book? I know he
I don't
has to
know
written a
that.
book by
If
now.
I'm being completely honest with you, I don't know that I would like run out and decide I want to read the Norman Lear book. I don't know that. That's not where.
So I know a lot of time people like, in the book, they'll be like, well, I felt this way and I'm sorry and everything like that. But it would be nice to see him try to address those concerns because I feel like, especially given that the time and also just given that good times mean so much to so many people, and the history that we're trying to look into now of Black creators from that time and how they've been treated, whether or
Hmm.
not they were treated well or fairly, the ones who are still around to try to address that. I think it will be important, or at the very least polite, to try to address that in the best way possible.
I agree with that. There's another question I wanted to ask you now, expanding more so in terms of the streaming as far as now, and especially when we're talking about, like we said, Black creators, as you just said.
Right.
I find that there seems to be a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of networks out there right now that are really supporting Black original television. You have All Black, you have Prime Video, you have HBO Max, you
Mhm.
have the we're going. We're going, right, we're going to go. Yeah, yeah. Then that's the appropriate place to stop me. So here's the question and the issue and the concern. So
Mhm.
HBO Max and Discovery, they announced their merger
Yeah.
into one single streaming service, but then with that comes all of a sudden things are just being removed out of nowhere. And you have creators like pleading and in literal tears on Twitter, like, this is my life's work. We brought it here. My family looked forward to watching this show. We were in the middle of episode 3, and all of a sudden, it's no longer on. It's a horrible thing to witness in real time. But I just want to definitely get your thoughts on what's happening here with streaming and with the advent of. And we went from cable, which was just obviously this terrible, like, it's we're all spending so much money on cable. Then we got into like the streaming services, which started to narrow down. Then Netflix started punishing us for sharing passwords, and then we had all these different streaming networks. And now it's like, who's streaming where? Who should I subscribe to? What's going on? But again, definitely let's narrow in on the HBO and Discovery question. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, let me start with the broader thing, like
Okay.
because a lot of us started with Netflix back when they were, mailing discs out. I
Right.
still get my discs mailed out because they don't have everything on Netflix that I want.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things, just aren't on streaming as it is, which
Mm-hmm.
I'll get back to as well. When they started the streaming thing, like they were, taking like libraries from other companies or like movies they just put out that they weren't really too, like big on or didn't have they weren't the tent poles basically and
Mm-hmm.
started putting them up and then like slowly quietly they thought ahead of the movie industry same way that Napster thought ahead of the music industry and
Right. Right. That's
they
true.
were
Mm-hmm.
legitimizing it at least in this case. And so next thing you know, Netflix is this thing where they are ubiquitous in our culture and in our like entertainment lives, and and people start going, well, we got to make our own streaming services just like they do. And so like Netflix hears that and said, well, we got to start making shows. So they started producing their own shows and
Mm-hmm.
movies, you know, from House of Cards and Stranger Things and
Mm-hmm.
Orange is the New Black. And they start making movies with Adam Sandler and Marlon Wayans and things. Every other company has their streaming service now. They took them all years to get up, but like, because at first they just started Hulu, like, all the, like, Hulu was owned by Universal, Disney,
Mm-hmm.
Warner's, and I believe might have been Viacom in there too as well. Like basically, they all own parts of Hulu now. Disney owns almost all of it, except for Universal owns a little bit of it. But Universal started Peacock. Warner's, got bought by AT&T. AT&T said streaming service,
Mm-hmm.
HBO Max. Disney started Disney Plus. Paramount has Paramount Plus, which used to be CBS All Access.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is it is weird because they it's kind of thing it used to be a thing where people would go to Netflix to find movies, and now it's like everybody's movie is on their service, and
Right.
everybody wants to subscribe to all the services at the same time. So a lot of people, they jump month to month or whatever, and it really became which company can keep people there the longest. And Disney Plus obviously became the answer, because Disney, they bought Pixar, they bought
Mm-hmm.
Lucasfilm, and they bought Marvel. So they have Toy Story movies, they have Star Wars movies, and they have Avengers movies all on Disney Plus. Plus they have most of their Disney animated classics, enough of their Disney live action classics, and they just keep people there. Plus, they're making these new Star Wars and Marvel shows and things for kids that don't really, the internet doesn't really care as much about. But they're
Yeah.
the things that Disney is known for. They still do on there, and they're doing great. HBO Max wasn't doing quite as great at first. The problem was that, like, quality wise, they were doing great because they were
Mm-hmm.
giving out so many deals to people. Like,
It'd be like bundled into like phone service or some kind of something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like to like the customers, and like they were bringing in creatives. Like they gave Issa Rae like her new show Rap Shit that's on there now.
Mm-hmm.
They had like all like the show like Legendary may not have even gotten on network television, but it's on streaming.
Mm-hmm.
The reality show about the ballroom culture.
Mm-hmm.
know, there was so many, like, and then animation they expanded into. They were doing all these original animated shows and everything. When Warner Brothers merged with Discovery earlier in the year, they AT&T sold them off, and they also sold off $50 billion in debt
Oh wow.
to Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So the people at Discovery who became the heads of what's now Warner Bros. Discovery were like, telling Wall Street that, well, we're gonna first thing to do is pay this debt down and find 3 billion in cost savings. And the way they've gone about it has just been like, there's been like, it's been so severe, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Choose my words carefully, obviously, is that I don't
Mm-hmm.
blacklist myself, but
Right. Exactly. I'm about to work with somebody tomorrow.
I do feel like it's been very severe and very,
it's been jarring.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's been drawing not just to the people, but to the people who are involved. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing with the Bad Girl movie, which the stories were like, it was bad, it was bad. The movie had just bit started editing. It was, if it was in any sort of bad shape, a movie at that stage, that's when you are just trying to figure out, what do we need to do? Do we need to shoot a couple of extra scenes? They already had extra scenes to shoot.
Right.
There was no VFX, no music. It was, basically a work print they were watching.
Mm-hmm.
There are movies that have turned all the way around in the edit, like both Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. These gigantic movies that took a whole lot of work to put together. Endgame was finished like right before they had to send it out to the into theaters. They
Mm-hmm.
shot like scenes like the weeks before.
Mm.
It's sometimes it just gets that tight. Sometimes you need the extra time to fix
Mm-hmm.
things. But like they took that away. There was a Scooby Doo movie. The animation department was working on it, took that away. They canceled a lot of these shows that were taken from Cartoon Network to put on HBO Max. And there was a whole thing where they didn't talk about it. Was the main thing. It wasn't a
Yeah.
thing where we are removing these shows in October. It
Mm-hmm.
was, we're removing these shows in less than 7 days. They're gone, and they hadn't told the creators and everything. And people were just like, they were on Twitter, they were like distraught and everything. Now a lot of these things, they didn't talk about it. They put them on, what do you call it, digital download on VOD, where you
Mm-hmm.
can go to like iTunes or Amazon, whatever, and pay $1.99 an episode or $3.99 to rent a movie, whatever like that. But they didn't announce a lot of that. People had to discover that on their own,
Mm.
which is part of the problem, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And just also just the abruptness of it, and the why are you removing things. The answer they gave is that like they're trying to save money on like content, and they're merging the services and everything. But it's like,
But there's no like it's like there's no conversation with the stakeholders. Like there's
right,
nothing. Right,
right,
exactly. So you can give that answer, but we were here for this, or you're not even talking to anyone. There was no survey.
and
Nothing.
it's, yeah, it's going to damage. I definitely feel like it's going to damage how people interact with HBO Max, or with Warner Brothers in general. Like, there's going to be a fear of, will my stuff get up? Will I be able to
Yeah,
edit
that's
it? I
true.
mean, will it go away at some point that I don't want it to go away? And I mean, they already had the thing last year where they were putting all the movies on HBO Max because of the pandemic. At the same time, they were going to movie theaters, and a lot of filmmakers don't like streaming services,
Mm,
like in general, and they want people to only see their movies on the big screen. That's why Christopher Nolan like left Warner Brothers and went to Universal to make his next movie, because even though he didn't have a movie that was affected, the
hmm.
principle and
Okay.
his friends who had movies like Denis Villeneuve, who did the first Dune, he didn't want the first Dune to be on streaming. You know, the Little Things, the Denzel Washington movie, they didn't want that to be on streaming. Like,
Hmm.
these were not what they had in mind when they made these movies. It's one thing to run it past people ahead of time. It's another thing to announce it and then have to go back and talk people down, give them extra money because of the back end they're missing, and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. It's been a lot for them over there. Like,
And then there were a lot of layoffs.
and the layoffs are just starting. That's the scariest part. And
That's
especially
crazy.
because, in Atlanta, a lot of those people work here who used to work for Turner. Now they work
Hmm.
for Warner Media, work for HBO Max or whatever. I'm worried about a lot of them here because
Hmm.
they're going to, reduce all of that down. They are, like you said, they started layoffs. They laid off, the entire HBO Max unscripted department because they're like, well, we have Discovery Channel stuff and, on TLC, we don't necessarily need have their own over here. We're going to merge. So they got rid of
Mm.
all those people. There's people who are talking about there may be a lack of diversity in the people who are being left behind, which is concerning, because I thought we were making strides. This is like the story of my life. I always think that we're doing better socially about
Then something happens.
we really
You're
are.
like, oh yeah, people
Uh,
going people.
yeah, people are.
Look at you! You look so disappointed.
I am. I'm so disappointed because it's like, we this whole feeling, but like I will say though, it is nice to have other options on streaming
Hmm.
where if you are an independent filmmaker, independent black filmmaker in particular, there are places you can take your movie now that
Yes, and
people.
you can have the meeting, you can have the conversation. You have a definite chance.
Mhm.
If it's something if it's a great product, there's no doubt in my mind if somebody had solidly had something good in front of them that they can minimally get that meeting and they're not going to get BS'd. I don't
Right.
think so. Yeah.
Right. And even if you wanted to go like and do it for yourself, like there's ways to do that as well that are a lot more accessible nowadays than it would have been, let's say 15 years ago, when you had to have raised the money to get film prints and distribution and rent theaters and all that kind of stuff. Now you can use, if not streaming services, just the idea of, video on demand or whatever and get
Hmm.
your stuff out there, you know, like that is a good thing. I feel like it
Hmm.
democratized the industry so much and like level the playing field a whole lot more. So I do tell people like, if people are looking for certain types of black movies, those movies exist.
Hmm.
If that movie you're looking for exists, you might have to put in 10% more work to find it
But it's
right
there.
now because the marketing budget may not be there, but it exists. Somebody
Hmm.
has made it and it's out there.
And I was gonna say this because I know the big thing on the internet, as far as like memes and jokes and getting their laughs off, is making fun of Tubi, right? Uh,
Oh no, don't.
I'm just saying, but look, here's where I'm going with this. I'm not Tubi. I ain't coming for you. I ain't coming for you. But it's like there's something to be said about the fact that the network is willing to give people the shot too,
Mhm.
and to the point that you just made, whether you could be looking for something that's like an Oscar level performance, or you could be looking for something that, listen, I remember back in the day when Tyler Perry's plays, people
Mhm.
used to record them and we were sitting in front of the TV watching the actual physical play.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we would watch, and that was the entertainment. Like the gang would get together, and we're all sitting down in the living room, and it's like 10 of us cackling at the Tyler Perry plays. So
Mhm.
and I'm just using that as sort of an example. It's like what's on Tubi. We've seen some things. I just saw the wildest scene that just didn't even make any sense at all. Like a guy was using the bathroom, and then the lady was like, and I don't even know what movie this is from. So God help me, this could be like a best friend of mine or something like that. And I'm just but The manager's in the bathroom. He's sitting on the toilet making sounds. His wife, I guess, walks in and is like, "Hey, honey, like tough day at work. They were giving me a hot." I'm like, "You want to do this now?" Like that's the scene, and I don't even. It wasn't even coming off like it was particularly supposed to be funny, or maybe if it is funny, it just wasn't funny. It was just weird.
Hmm.
But anyway, I say all that to say that like the fact that I can get up today and at least try, and maybe I'm not going to be, I'm not Martin Scorsese, right?
Hmm.
But I can try, and that someone will be able to see my little film,
Hmm.
is to me, I have to be able to say that I can respect that there's a place for that too.
Yeah, to
Mm-hmm.
be and Amazon Prime does that as well. Amazon
Mm-hmm.
Prime actually, I don't know if they still have it. They had like a good selection of like Nigerian films and Hollywood movies on there as well on streaming. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of like like indie movies as well. Like there are places that they'll put the movies out there. Like I have movie I worked on my friend Bobby Huntley. You might
What's
know.
up, Bobby?
Yeah, like it's called the Charlie movie.
Mm-hmm.
La Vie Magnifique de Charlie. It went to streaming. It was people could go on. I don't know if it's still on Tubi and everything, but like
Mm-hmm.
it was on Quality TV and everything. Like it was out there. Like you could watch it. This thing that was on at one point on on my laptop as I'm trying to color correct it. It's out there. Streaming
This
stuff.
thing I worked on. How does that feel though when you saw that? I mean, that's a moment.
It's definitely a moment because like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you work on something so much and
Mm-hmm.
it's you look at it every day, you're trying to find this thing and that thing and pull out this issue and that issue, you might lose track of the macro of the thing of like how an audience will react to it.
Okay.
And like the first time we had a screening and like it went over so well, like I was just like it was like the magic moment where like the camera like dollies in on you and like you get a big smile on your face. Like the scene,
Uh-uh.
just like the scene in Dolomite is my name, which is a great movie about movie making.
Mm-hmm.
Like scenes where like they show the movie and like there's an audience waiting outside for the next show and everything, and just the happiness that Rudy Ray Moore was able to pull this thing off. Like that movie, I love that movie so much. That movie was so good. I wish it had got more awards attention, but like it was so good. Like and this like I could relate to it so much. Just like the low budget filmmaking and
Mm-hmm.
everything. Um Wesley Snipes doing that, insane turn playing Derville Martin, one of my favorite black character actors from the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Rosemary's Baby, man. You've seen Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, right?
Yes. Yes, with Sidney Poitier.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the scene where Spencer Tracy hits the black guy's car, he's like, there ought to be a law. That's the real Martin.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
he goes on to the Red Dolomite later.
Oh, that's
Oh
wild.
man, you didn't even see me.
I
Look
did
at
not
my
know.
bumper.
So that's what I said. That's why I like talking to you, because I always get these interesting facts. Do you remember that show back in the day? It was called Pop Up Video.
Yes.
And that was, to me, that was an amazing show. And that's what sometimes you remind me of, that, because you're like, how did you know that? Or how did you even notice that right there behind in that scene? I didn't even think to look beyond the person, So it's always really cool that you pay such close attention to detail like that.
Like when ever since I was a kid, I wanted to do something relating to like movies or video or whatever. And so like, it always became the thing of like paying attention to how people do things, place things, trying to keep track of people who work
Mm-hmm.
on the same things and trying to, chart trajectories and see how people learn, basically
Mm-hmm.
how they grow and evolve, whether that's actors, directors, writers, producers, cinematographers, editors, special effects people, especially for what I do now, like motion designers like Saul Bass, like those people, like, I'm fascinated trying to figure out how their minds work, basically, like how they're able to express what was in their heads or in their
Mm-hmm.
hearts or whatever, and try to get that out on, on film, basically. And especially about how, for Black people in particular and other minorities, like how we've been doing, these sorts of things ourselves, maybe not with enough fanfare since film began, Oscar Micheaux and, Spencer Williams, people who were making these independent films, back in the 30s and 40s
Mm-hmm.
for all Black theaters. like that was one thing I learned like in the last, I think, decade or so. Like, because I knew that theaters were segregated inside, but that we had all black theaters of our own, and that's where a lot of these movies went to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that these movies exist. There's a nice box set called Pioneers of African American Cinema that I got that has a lot of these movies on it, and black folks have not changed. First of all,
That's lots of
maybe some of the slang has changed, maybe some
Mhm.
of the fashions, and we have color now, but black people have not changed. There's a mix of, a couple of the movies are about religion, a couple of them are about, like the underground, a couple of them are about just nice, regular, like black life, and like the subject matter is remarkably still the same, just tweak here and there.
Right. I was thinking about that because I was listening to that Audible podcast with JB Smooth, and he's profiling all of these celebrate, well, they are, so I'm not gonna say underrated or anything like that. I'm not gonna use reductive terms, but
Hmm.
comedians like Miles Mabley,
Hmm.
Red Fox, all these people, and when you listen to that humor, even through today's lens, I mean, some of it's just too raunchy, and it's like it couldn't work now, of course,
Hmm.
but it's still so funny.
Hmm.
And funny is just gonna be funny, and
Right.
especially when you talk about those kinds of jokes where they're not punching down and they're just talking about like a day in the life, or this happened to me at work, or back at home, or I was cooking dinner. Like when people tell a story, it's just hilarious, whether it was done in the 1950s
Hmm.
or told now.
I feel like black people in general, comedy has been one of our defenses.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the whole thing, people say, laugh, you got to laugh to keep from crying a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
time. Like, some of the funniest people I know are some of my older relatives, who've been through a whole lot. They grew up
Mm-hmm.
in the South in the 50s and 60s,
Mm-hmm.
they won't even tell me all the stories of the things they've gone through because,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is just, it's tragic for them. But, they'll sometimes turn parts of it into jokes, and they, sometimes you have to have that, comedy in your life to get through things. Like, I remember when they announced they were making the Black Wonder Years
Mm-hmm.
series, which isn't, funny thing is it isn't a reboot. It's a parallel story because it takes place in the same universe. Basically, we find out. And
I didn't watch it. Is
yeah,
it? Yeah. Did you watch it?
yeah,
Oh, do you like it?
it's a good show. It's a good
Okay.
show. The only problem I have with it is that it's 5 minutes shorter than it would have been back 20 years ago because more commercials and things, and so that
Right.
kind of affects like the detail of the story a little bit. But I think it's great. But people were like, "How are you gonna make a comedy about growing up in black in the South in the '60s?" And I was like, "Well, a lot of us have parents who grew up in the South in the '60s.
Yeah.
They made it through. Every day wasn't miserable. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of some days were miserable, and like a lot of things in society were bad. But we had to have some sort of humor to get through life. We had to, make our way, get our own, like happiness somehow. We had to
Mm-hmm.
have those things.
Mm-hmm.
And
For
like,
sure.
I definitely feel like it's strange because you don't, I think that's one issue I have with, one thing I feel bad that we didn't have opportunities to make as many movies like books. We have books from that period that reflect these things, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but you don't see these things in movies. You hear it more in some of the music, especially when you get into the '70s. You definitely hear it there, of course. But like, it's interesting to go to like movies that are made in the '60s or music that was done in like the mid '60s, like your Motown and things like that, where you don't quite have people reflecting the reality of what's going on. Um,
Oh, it's like intending to kind of like cheer you up more so,
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's okay.
And it even crosses like race because you look at white culture in the 1960s and the hippies and everything like that, and Vietnam protests. You watch movies and they're just the '60s is kind of like the mid to early to mid '60s to like the most staid period of American cinema possible. Like everything is still Doris Day and Rock Hudson. It's simple, it's basic.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, European cinema is blooming. They're doing all, they're exploring sexuality and,
Mm-hmm.
existential questions of life. And
Mm-hmm.
we're over here, we're, trying to do, light comedy still.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in like '66, '67 where you get, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Graduate, Bonnie and Clyde, and In the Heat of the Night. These movies basically come in and sort of kind of like push cinema towards a more mature path, basically. Like movies from 67 to 73, that's what I'm watching a lot of now. And it's just amazing watching the whole thing shift and change.
And well, let me ask before you continue that. And
Mhm.
then what did you feel about with the advent of blaxploitation then?
Yeah, I was
Mhm,
about to say, like, when they
mhm,
start bringing in black directors, Gordon Parks
mhm,
does The Learning Tree, Ozzie Davis does Cotton Comes to Harlem, and Gordon Parks does Shaft. Blaxploitation movies, I even the bad ones I
mhm,
love.
mhm,
Like, especially when the director is also black.
mhm.
A lot of them are, of course, done by white directors. And sometimes some of them are done with care, like Foxy Brown is done, I think, very well. Some of them are done sort of kind of like we're just pushing a movie out, like Blackenstein, like But even still, just watching people try to figure out, we have this whole culture that in mainstream cinema we've been ignoring or marginalizing and making terrible fun of for the last
Mhm,
70 years. How do we, because the whole issue, of course, was that with white flight, these gigantic movie palaces in like the big cities were full of black people, and they were sometimes empty because you're showing these boring staid white movies, so you got to get something the audience can relate to in there. How do we do that? Was the question of blaxploitation. And then you have movies like Claudine, and Cooley House come out during the same period, but aren't really blaxploitation. These
mhm,
are, I would say A-tier movies about black characters.
mhm,
Like Claudine and Cooley High, two of my favorite movies of all time.
mhm.
Like and those are the kind of movies I really, really like. In the whole HBO Max thing, I know this is gonna be something people will debate. I was especially worried about the fate of the House Party remake they were doing.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Mhm, mhm,
because whether it's good or bad, it
mhm,
was a first time movie director. There's a guy, I think his name is Kyle Maddock. He was a music video director.
mhm.
You had Jacob Lattimore, a lot of these young black stars who have been in movies and haven't really gotten a chance to be the lead of
In
them.
the movie. Mhm,
And like, I just was hopeful to see people get that opportunity. And I know now they've announced that it's going to go into theaters, and I hope it does well in theaters. I was kind of like, like putting it on streaming was taking some of the pressure off of it,
yeah.
but like we'll see. People like, why would you remake House Party? Why not? I
Yeah,
love House
I
Party.
wanted to ask you about the remix because I actually watched Bel Air and I thought it was good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought it was
I
really well done.
I think a lot of people don't realize how many things are repurposed and remade just in general. Like you said, like stories are told and
They're
retold.
told, yeah.
Like when Reggie Hudlin made House Party,
Mhm,
it's basically the concept is that it's one of those white beach movies, those Frankie and Annette movies from the 60s, just
mhm,
through a late 80s black teenager lens.
mhm.
We're throwing a party, we're having fun, and all that kind of stuff and everything. It's the same sort of setup, basically, just modernized and made it a little bit cooler for us. So it's I don't feel like I'm only mad at bad remakes. There
Right.
are a lot of remakes that are either more popular than the movie that's remade. Like Scarface is the best example of that.
Mm.
You tell people Scarface is a remake of a movie from the 30s, they're like, huh? And it is. And there are ones that are considered better, like Imitation of Life.
Yeah, it's yeah. If you, I
Like,
would agree with that one. That one I know. Mhm,
yeah, like
mhm,
people have seen the black and white one with Louise Beavers, the color one with Juanita Moore. I know people will debate which one is better. I feel like the color one is better.
mhm,
Um, even though that's the one I saw first, but just like they did Louise Beaver so dirty in the first one, like that's
mm,
still during the era like the Stephen Fetchits and things like that.
mhm.
They're so dirty. The remake, is a little bit better with that stuff. Not good, but
Right, but it's better.
and just like the melodrama is so good, and Susan Conner is so good, Juanita Moore is so good. They take over the movie. They're both Oscar nominated. They cancel each other out in the voting, unfortunately, but they
Mhm,
were so good.
mhm.
um, and so when people announce remakes, I'm mostly like, because the thing, of course, with a remake, why would you remake anything? You want some of your marketing done for you, basically. So you're
Okay.
trying to find things that properties or titles people already know, so that you save a little bit of money as far as like you get more money out of your marketing push basically for something that people like.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is just from adapting things from one medium to another. But film remakes have been done forever. When sound
Mm-hmm.
came in, they remade a lot of silent movies. When color came in, they remade a lot of black and white movies. Now it's just simply, remaking movies that were from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Sometimes you get like, some musical remakes, like Hairspray is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
I think Hairspray remake is good. It's a very different movie from the John Waters original.
Mm-hmm.
John Waters seems to like it. He's in the remake playing a flasher.
So that right. Plan of blast. But that listen, if he likes it, then
Yeah,
that's the cosign that's needed.
yeah. I'm trying to think of other like remakes where one remake that I thought was weird because it's not better than the original, just it got everything the original got right wrong, and everything the original got wrong right was Sparkle.
Oh, okay.
The remake of Sparkle that the Akils did.
Mm.
Mara Brock Akil. With Jordan Sparks and Whitney Houston and everything. What they were trying to do was make a more grounded movie that sort of kind of had a slightly bigger scope than the original,
Mm-hmm.
but still reflected what the people liked about it. But
Mm-hmm.
like they kind of missed the grit of the original while trying to add some polish to it. And so, like, because the original Sparkles movie that I go up and down on because there are a lot of things that are so good about it, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things where you could tell that the director was out of his depth. Samuel Steen, who never did another feature, he was an editor by trade, and he did TV movies. I don't think he
Mm-hmm.
ever did another theatrical feature other than Sparkle. Joel Schumacher had written it; he wanted to direct it, but they didn't let him direct yet.
Oh,
And people don't know that Joel Schumacher came to Hollywood with the script for Sparkle.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
in
interesting.
the '70s, he was kind of like the leading writer of black comedies. He wrote
Mm-hmm.
Sparkle, he wrote Car Wash, and he wrote The Wiz. And his first movie that he was second, I believe, was DC Cab with Mr. T.
I did not know that.
Yeah, because he wanted to. Funny thing is, Joel Schumacher, after he made Batman and Robin, and that went the way that it went,
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to do Dreamgirls next. At that time in 99, 98, 99.
Huh.
And a Joel Schumacher directed version of Dreamgirls would then have been a very interesting thing.
I know Dreamgirls is that's the movie you and I as well. We
Yeah.
share.
'Cause he wanted Lauryn Hill to play Dina, and I remember reading that they actually offered her the part, she turned it down. So I don't know who they would
Hmm.
have got instead. This was right when Lauryn Hill was hot
When
too,
she was, yeah, that was
when
her
she
peak.
had Miseducation out. They wanted
Mhm.
Kelly Price to play Effie, which would have been good at the time. I
That
feel,
at that time that would have been good.
yeah,
Yes.
and they
Hmm.
wanted Don Cheadle to play Jimmy Early.
Hmm. That would have worked.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like the movie got made at a time it needed to get made though, because
Yes.
when it got made, they had, like Beyonce, they had Jamie Foxx, they had Danny Glover, they had this all-star cast, they introduced Jennifer Hudson to audiences. Um, I have things about the movie that I don't like,
Hmm.
but like a lot of that was actually solved. They put out a director's cut a couple of years ago.
I remember
That
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the director's cut is actually better.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. I
Because
have to rerun.
when they put the movie out originally, they were kind of scared about it being a musical, so they kind of cut the musicality out of it a little bit.
Hmm.
Like when Cece and Effie make up and they don't sing, I'm like,
Well, why would yeah? Why wouldn't they sing here? It's
and
right
so in the
here.
director's cut is right there. They sing the song, and I was like, okay, all
Okay.
right.
I want to ask you one more question, and I was like, I do not want to lose this question because when
Mhm.
you're talking about like when we move from black and white into color, I wanted to know what you think, especially since I know that you worked with a lot of color correction and so forth.
Mhm.
What do you think about those black and white movies that weren't remade, but that were then made into color films?
Oh, colorizing.
Colorizing, yes.
Okay. I don't have a big issue against the idea of colorization.
Okay.
I do feel like it should not be necessary for people to watch black and white movies. That if you have a movie that's made in black and white, especially something like Citizen Kane, where it's in the contract that has to stay in black and white because Orson Welles was on his deathbed, like, don't let them colorize my movie.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Don't let them do that to me.
Yeah, because Turner had the rights to it. They actually had
Mhm.
started on the colorization process, and the estate was like, no, no, no.
Wow.
But when colorization first started in the '80s, the movies didn't look great, and when they did the color, because like people's mouths were still
Yeah.
gray on the tongues and things, and the color would flicker. But nowadays, with AI technology and things, you can do a decent looking colorized version of a movie. It's just a matter of, is that what people would have wanted?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
There are a handful of movies I know, like Howard Roach's Babies in Toyland, where they wanted to make it in color but just couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've seen it, the colorized version of that. It's actually decent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have a hang up against it, but I feel like people should be able to respect the black and white versions just fine,
Mm-hmm.
because it does cost money, it does take time. And it's more my concern about about documentaries being colorized, like documentary footage. Like, people, there was this weird thing going on where there was this weird rumor, people thought like that history books were putting civil rights pictures in black and white because it was to fool us and thinking it was so long ago.
What?
And I was like, in the history book, there's a caption right below it. It tells you 1965,
Yeah,
63.
sources like yeah, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's credits
If the
and.
Yeah, pictures in black and white. That's probably because it was a press picture to go out to the wires back then, and
Mm-hmm.
most newspapers were 90% in black and white and continued for a very long time after that. Anyway, that's why the pictures were in black and white. They didn't need to be in color, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so people like I've noticed people start colorizing old pictures because they're like trying to quote unquote correct what they see as a wrong. But I'm just like, sometimes, and especially nowadays, you have a black and white movie like Roma or like Mank, the movie about Citizen Kane.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you want a thing to be in black and white because you just want to deal with value. You don't want to deal with hues and saturation. You basically
Mm-hmm.
just want to deal with like your blacks and whites and grays. You want to try to create a statement that way, and you can create some striking statements that way, and that's perfectly fine. That's what somebody wants to do, and they pull it off well.
Mm-hmm. I think
That's
for
why.
me, the reason why I would watch, why I prefer to watch the original film as is, kind of building on your point, is that this is how they made it. It's almost like sometimes, the comparison can be made, whereas like you physically pick up a book and want to like flip the pages as opposed to like reading
Hmm.
it on your iPad. I mean,
Hmm.
sometimes it's just like I'd rather just have it the way that it was presented to me and the way it's supposed to be. I mean, and it's
Right.
not taking anything away from the advancement in the processes, and where I could not discernibly even probably tell that it used to be black and white, but I
Hmm.
just would like to just see it as is. And like you said, there's other things I'm not thinking about. Now I almost feel like I'm more focused on the
Hmm.
work if I'm not paying attention to the colors and, oh, did they get this bush right? Or hey, look at his coat. That's a very nice brown. Like I would get lost in the insignificant details if I knew
That
something like that.
reminds me, there was like a somebody taking some public domain Little Rascals prints and colorized them, and Stymie was orange, and that just bothered me so much.
It's like I can only but imagine, because I know how passionate you are. That's why I crack up. But I know we talked about your business,
Hmm.
Leco Media, but I wanted to talk about your podcast coming up.
Right. So for a couple of years, we were doing the Say Something Nice podcast, where we were
Hmm.
covering we were doing movie reviews, TV reviews, and discussion. We're going to relaunch that in more of a tidier format. Basically, it's sort of kind of the same idea where we'll be covering movie and TV news, movie and TV history, and discussions, like broad
Hmm.
discussions like this right here. Like, it's going to be called Ready for Our Close Up,
Ready for our close up.
as
Great.
in like people of color, minorities, LGBTQ people. We are
Hmm.
ready for our close up. Basically,
Hmm.
the concept behind the name. It'll be sometime during the fall.
Hmm.
The Twitter account is already up. It's R the number 4 CU pod.
Okay.
And so just follow that for more information as dates and things get together. Hopefully, we'll be able to do a whole lot more interviews, sort of in depth things,
Hmm.
trying to push the history angle a little bit harder to try to get people interested in some of the history of some of like Black creatives who never quite got their due from the period.
Hmm.
Because there was the whole thing when the whole thing about the Betty Boop thing, like
Hmm. Yeah, there was. Yeah, that was
yeah,
a thing.
there was like, because people misreported it so much, because there was a little girl who was a cotton club performer who did this thing where she did the boop boop be doop in her songs, White woman named Helen Kane sees sees the performance, takes that, makes that into an act of her own. She gets famous. Betty Boop is a parody of the white woman. They
Right.
didn't know about the black girl until Helen Kane sued the studio, the Max Fleischer cartoon studio, and they during discoveries like, how do we win this case? How do we win this case? Aha! That's how they found out about that. But people were passing around fake pictures and things and all
Oh,
this
that
kind of
went that
stuff.
far.
It went that far. Like, this black woman that they took the thing from, it was a little girl first, and second, then the thing was taken from her by somebody else. It was a whole thing. But I feel like when people have those discussions, like, because attaching it to a figure we're familiar with, like Betty Boop, makes it easier because you don't have to go back too far. But there were black performers back then in the early '30s who kind of fit that mold, who we don't talk about anymore. Like Nina Mae McKinney is a good example. She was the star of the first all black talking musical called Hallelujah.
Mm-hmm.
She's white, she could sing, she could dance. Her career didn't go the way it should have, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
She kind of just got, shorts and bit parts. Like, she was in a couple of movies, but it didn't go the way it should have. They also have F the Waters from that time.
Mm-hmm.
F the Waters, of course, she stayed in movies, and when she became older, she became more famous, as like she was famous on Broadway and famous in New York, but as far as like in movies, she really became famous in the '40s with Cabin in the Sky and Pinky, where she got nominated for the Oscar. But
Mm-hmm.
back in the late '20s, early '30s, she was, kind of like, doing the sexy lady archetype sort of a thing, for black women back then. There
Mm-hmm.
were other performers like there's all these, old Warner Brothers 30 shorts with black performers and everything. They aren't all as, troubling as you might think they would be.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are actually just the performances, nothing else, which is
Mm-hmm.
the ones I like. But we just want to kind of explore, maybe like the top sort of level of that and introduce people to some of these things so that we can see that, we've been doing these things for so long. Our talent, came with us, from Africa. It came with us from, like our origins. We've always had it. It's not a thing we've developed recently, and we've been trying to show it for all this time. And so, it's a thing of this is what we were doing at this time. This is why Dorothy Dandridge took so long to break. Why her career was this and that way.
Mm-hmm.
Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, trying their best to push through an industry where they were the only two black men who were basically, quote unquote, allowed to be in movies, and how that affected them. You know, the first initial like Hollywood black movies, The Learning Tree, and Cotton Goes to Harlem, and Shaft, and and Watermelon Man.
Mm-hmm.
Melvin Van Peebles, my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Yeah, have you ever seen Watermelon Man?
I haven't seen it. We actually interviewed. No, I have not. I have not seen Watermelon Man. Don't let me lie to you. No, 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 no.
It's very good.
Is it? It's really that good?
It's really that good. It's about a white man who goes to bed one night, wakes up, he's black.
I'm looking right here. I'm looking at the film. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure that I see it. Yeah.
It's
Okay.
really good.
Yeah, no, because I know it was like a really controversial and like I guess in the best
Yes.
way, but yeah, I remember seeing that. That's one of those films that they tell you. When I went to school, I did go to school for broadcast journalism, but I wasn't like concentrated in film in the same way. But I know this is one of those films you have to see to get a sort of an idea of things. So you just gave me some homework.
It's good homework, though. It's good homework. Trust
That's
me.
good. No, I'm gonna check. I'm gonna check that out. What is that movie now? Because now you made me think of another movie that I really, really love. In the style of comedy. Hollywood Shuffle.
Hollywood Shuffle, yes.
That's another one of my really, really favorite movies. Like they are tripping in here. But it's a favorite. I thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you
It's
for
been
having me.
so no, thank you. I've learned a lot, as I always do. Like I said, I love to hear your opinion on things because you always offer a great bit of depth to things that can make people just understand why things are the way they are, where they used to be,
Mhm.
and whether we're better off.
Right.
So I think a lot of that is very, very it's just absolutely incredible. You're such a resource in that sense. If there's anything that little old me could do for you, you know what I mean? Because I know, like I said, I think that the kinds of discussions that you can have, they bring such purpose and meaning to creators that aren't able to have these high level conversations. I mean, these are not questions that are asked of the average interviewer, you know.
Right.
So you're talking about things that, I mean, it's, I mean, to use a, I don't know, it's the best example I can use is that when you just really sit down with someone and maybe like an inside the actor studio kind of feel,
Mhm.
where you're just really talking about the work and the journey, and you're one of those few people that really get it on that level. And I think that, you know, I'm just looking forward to when the podcast drops and everything else you have in store. Is there anything else you have in store besides your podcast, of course, and your studio?
That's it for right now.
Hmm.
Hopefully next year
Hmm.
I'll be able to talk about some of my own creative projects.
Hmm.
But I'm right now building a foundation, like literally building a office, as you can see in here.
Oh, this
Yeah.
back here. And do you feel like relaunching now? Because I know you've had to say something nice podcast for years, but relaunching in this time, do you feel like it's a best or a really great time to do this with this type of focus?
I feel like it's needed. The funny things like the news from the last couple of weeks about the Netflix thing, and the HBO Max thing, as far as like streaming, starting to get really sort of kind of like tumultuous and things. I
Yeah.
feel like there's so many things. Like I find myself a lot last couple of weeks being like, man, I wish we were still recording.
Yeah, there's so much to say. Yeah, it's
There's
true.
so much to say.
Hmm. Hmm. That's deserving of like a discussion, not just necessarily a tweet. You
Right,
know,
right,
yeah, for
right.
sure, for sure. Well, I mean, listen, those things are not going to get old. So when you guys relaunch, we can still talk about it. I'm listening.
Absolutely.
Those things are not going to get old. Those stuff, and we don't even know where the heck things are going to go from this point on either. Because I mean, if they're making announcements like, "Hey guys, like you said, 7 days from now, bye bye," what? That's not nice. It feels like, you know, like it's one of those things. Like I've definitely worked jobs where it's like here today, gone tomorrow. Like, okay, I thought we were a family. No. Never think that at a job, guys. But anyway, thank you so much for your time, Brandon. Again, I feel truly special, and I'm glad to have you as a friend.
I'm glad to have you as a friend too, Coco. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Brandon. Thank you, and take care.
You
And
too.
let me know if you can, if I can give you. No, what we'll talk. We'll talk. I'm going to edit this out and post.
Okay.
Take care, Brandon. If you want to see more content like this on blackfilm.com, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that bell.